I still remember the day the entire city stopped to whisper about one woman, Jessy. In a world where wealth meant everything, where women dreamed of marrying men who could give them status, diamonds, and mansions, Jessy did something unthinkable. She said no, not just to any man, but to Adrian, heir to the largest empire in the city, the man every girl secretly dreamed of. Tall, impeccably dressed, with a smile that charmed business tycoons and broke countless hearts, Adrian wasn't just rich. He was the richest. And Jessy? She wasn't the kind of woman people expected to defy him. She was beautiful in her own quiet way, graceful yet modest, her eyes carrying the softness of kindness and the strength of someone who had seen storms. That morning, the news spread like wildfire. Jessy turned down Adrian. She must be out of her mind. Does she know what she just lost? A lifetime of luxury. Crazy girl, she'll regret it. Every cafe, every marketplace, every whispered corner carried her name, and always with one word attached: crazy. But Jessy didn't flinch. She stood in front of her family, her friends, her society, and with a calm voice said, "I cannot marry Adrian. He's not mine to love." The air froze. No one understood. How could she not see what everyone else saw? How could she throw away a life of unimaginable riches, security, and fame? But here's the truth no one knew. Jessy wasn't blind. She saw too much. Behind Adrian's dazzling smile, behind his carefully polished shoes and expensive watch, Jessy had glimpsed something no one else cared to notice. His eyes didn't shine for her. His heart didn't beat for her. And Jessy, stubborn yet brave, refused to live a life built on lies. But the world? The world wasn't ready for her choice. Her family cried. Her relatives shamed her. Suitors avoided her like she carried some invisible curse. Neighbors whispered as she walked by, "She's ruined her future. She'll die alone." Imagine refusing the city's crown jewel. They thought Jessy's refusal was foolishness, madness, a crime against common sense. But what they didn't know was this: Adrian, the richest man alive, belonged to someone else. His heart had long been captured by a woman who lived in shadows. Her name was Sujana. And Jessy? She wasn't crazy. She was protecting a love story the world wasn't ready to believe. Jessy's days grew heavier after the rejection. Invitations stopped coming. Conversations ended when she entered a room. Even her closest friends kept their distance, afraid her bad luck might rub off on them. But she didn't care. Or at least, she told herself she didn't. At night, when the world was quiet, she'd sit by her window, looking at the glowing skyline. The empire Adrian ruled. She whispered to herself, "They'll never understand, but I know the truth." And that truth was heavier than gold, sharper than diamonds. It was the secret that tied her fate to Sujana's, and to Adrian's hidden pain. The city thought Jessy had thrown away everything, but in reality, she had saved something far more precious: love itself. Because sometimes, the bravest thing a woman can do is refuse what everyone else would kill to have. And Jessy was brave. That was the day her story truly began, not as the woman who refused the richest man, but as the woman who protected a secret that could shatter the entire city. They called her crazy. But the truth? Jessy was the only one sane enough to see through the glittering lies. And this is her story. To understand why Jessy's refusal shook the city so deeply, you have to understand Adrian. Adrian wasn't just rich, he was untouchable. His name carried more weight than laws. His businesses stretched across continents. His parties filled newspapers. His donations funded hospitals. And his smile convinced anyone that he was the golden boy of fate. Men wanted to be him. Women wanted to marry him. Parents wanted their sons to copy him, and their daughters to catch his attention. He was the dream, the prize, the perfect ending every fairy tale promised. At least, that's what the world thought. But perfection is often a mask. And Adrian's mask was crafted so flawlessly, so convincingly, that even those closest to him never questioned what lay underneath. Every morning, he stepped into his towering glass office with a confidence that made men shrink and women blush. He wore suits that cost more than most families earned in a year. He carried himself like a king who knew no defeat. Yet his eyes betrayed him. They were dark, deep, and haunted. People thought it was focus, ambition, the kind of intensity that made billionaires. But Jessy, in that single fleeting glance the night he proposed, saw something different. A longing, a grief, a silent cry for someone who wasn't there. The night Adrian proposed to Jessy had been a spectacle. It wasn't love. It was strategy. A move so grand it made headlines before she even answered. A private rooftop dinner under fairy lights. The city skyline sparkling below them. A diamond ring, so massive it reflected the stars. Photographers coincidentally nearby, ready to capture the fairy tale. "Jessy," Adrian said, his voice smooth like silk, rehearsed yet flawless. "Be my wife. Share my empire. Share my name." The world expected her to say yes. The cameras expected her to smile. The diamond expected to land on her finger. But Jessy's heart whispered no, because she saw it, the flicker in his eyes when he spoke her name. It wasn't love. It wasn't even desire. It was emptiness. The kind of emptiness that no amount of wealth could fill. Jessy, calm yet trembling inside, whispered back, "I can't." And in that single word, she shattered the illusion. The cameras clicked. The gossip churned. The city erupted, but no one dared to look at Adrian's face when she turned him down. No one dared to notice how, for the briefest second, he seemed relieved. As if Jessy's refusal had spared him from another chain he didn't want. Adrian left the rooftop that night with his mask perfectly intact. He smiled at the flashing lights. He told the reporters it was a misunderstanding. He walked into his limousine as if nothing could touch him. But inside, behind tinted glass, his jaw clenched. His hand tightened into a fist. His chest ached, not from rejection, but from the ghost of a name that still lived in his heart. Sujana. Her name wasn't written in any newspaper. No photograph of her ever appeared in magazines. She was invisible to the world that worshipped Adrian, but to him, she was the only truth left. The world went on spinning. People mocked Jessy for her refusal. Some pitied Adrian, saying she didn't deserve him. Others speculated he would soon propose to someone else, someone more willing, more obedient, more grateful. But Adrian proposed to no one. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. He kept building his empire, throwing parties, winning awards. The cameras still adored him, the public still worshipped him. But at night, when he stood alone on his penthouse balcony, staring at the city lights below, he thought of her, of Sujana, the woman who once held his heart before the world demanded he give it away. It wasn't that Adrian couldn't have Jessy, or any woman for that matter. He could buy diamonds bigger than fists. He could arrange weddings that looked like fairy tales. He could bend laws, silence scandals, erase histories, but he couldn't erase Sujana. Her laughter still echoed in his memory. Her touch still lingered on his skin. Her absence was a wound that refused to heal. And though the world believed he was the richest man alive, Adrian knew the truth. He was the poorest of them all, because he had everything, except her. And Jessy? She was the only one who had seen it. The only one brave enough to say no. The world called her crazy. But Adrian knew better. For Jessy's refusal hadn't humiliated him. It had reminded him of the love he once lost, and the woman he still could not let go. Sujana. The name whispered in silence, the secret that chained his heart, and soon, fate would bring her back into his life, in ways no one could predict. Long before Adrian became the man with the empire, before the newspapers wrote his name in gold ink, before the world crowned him as the city's richest, he was just a young man with ordinary dreams. And in those dreams, there was always Sujana. They met in college, not through some grand, dramatic encounter, but in the quiet simplicity of life. Sujana was not the kind of girl who turned heads instantly. She didn't wear flashy clothes or crave attention. But she carried a softness that was impossible to ignore. Her smile wasn't wide, yet it warmed everyone who saw it. Her words weren't loud, yet they lingered longer than the noisy chatter of others. Adrian first noticed her in the library, her head bent over books, strands of hair falling across her face. He, the heir to wealth, should have been untouchable. To someone like her. Yet there was something in the way she tucked her hair back absent-mindedly, in the way her lips moved as she whispered notes to herself, that made him forget everything else. "Do you always whisper to books?" he asked one afternoon, standing across from her table. She looked up, startled, then laughed softly. "Only when they don't answer me." It was such a simple reply, yet it stayed with him. From that day on, Adrian found excuses to be near her. Sometimes he'd claim he needed help with a subject he'd long mastered. Other times he'd accidentally end up in her group projects, and Sujana, though shy at first, found herself drawn to him too. Not because of his wealth, she never cared about that, but because he listened, really listened. With Adrian, she could talk about her dreams of becoming a teacher, of building a small school for children who couldn't afford one. With him, she could laugh without fear, cry without shame. And in turn, Adrian told her secrets he told no one else. He confessed that he hated the weight of his family's name, that sometimes he wished he could disappear into an ordinary life, that all the wealth in the world felt like chains around his neck, and Sujana, with her soft eyes and steady heart, never judged him. She simply whispered, "You don't need to be what the world wants. Just be Adrian." They were inseparable. Late-night walks across campus, coffee dates that lasted until sunrise, dreams whispered under starlight. Their love wasn't built on extravagance, it was built on truth. One winter evening, standing by the frozen fountain on campus, Adrian took her hand and said, "You're the only thing real in my world." Sujana squeezed his hand back and whispered, "And you're the only thing I never want to lose." For a time it seemed nothing could touch them, but life has a cruel way of testing love. Adrian's family never approved. His father, stern, powerful, obsessed with reputation, saw Sujana as a stain. A girl with no status, no wealth, no connections. "She will destroy you, Adrian," Adrian fought back. "I love her, that's enough." But to his father, love was weakness. Marriage was a transaction, a deal to merge empires, not hearts. Sujana, too, felt the storm closing in. She heard the whispers, saw the disapproving glares. She knew what it meant to stand against a family like Adrian's. And though she loved him with everything she had, fear began to creep in. What if she ruined his future? What if her love cost him everything? The breaking point came one evening when Adrian's father summoned her. He spoke coldly, cruelly, with words sharp as knives. "You will leave Adrian. If you love him, you will not drag him into ruin. Do you think the richest empire in this city will let itself be destroyed by a girl like you?" Sujana sat silent, her hands trembling in her lap. And then, he slid an envelope across the table. Money. Enough to change her life, enough to tempt anyone. Desperate, but Sujana didn't touch it. Instead, she whispered, "I don't want your money. I don't want him to suffer." The man's eyes narrowed. "Then disappear, or his suffering will be far worse than yours." That night, Sujana made the hardest choice of her life. She met Adrian one last time by the fountain where they had once promised forever. Her eyes were swollen from tears, but she forced a smile. "Adrian, we can't do this anymore." He froze. "What are you saying?" "I mean us. We're from different worlds. You'll find someone better." Adrian grabbed her hands, desperate. "No, don't say that. You are my world, Sujana. I don't care about the rest." She pulled away, her heart shattering with each word she forced out. "I don't want to be your burden." He shook his head furiously. "You're not a burden. You're the only thing that makes me alive." Her tears fell, betraying her. But she turned, whispering one final lie. "I don't love you anymore." And before he could stop her, she walked away. Adrian never knew the truth. He never knew about the threats, the pressure, the sacrifice. All he knew was that the woman who once promised him forever had abandoned him without warning. And so he buried himself in work, in ambition, in building an empire so untouchable that no one could ever hurt him again. But no matter how many buildings he owned, no matter how many awards he won, no matter how many women threw themselves at him, one truth remained. He still loved her. He always would. And Sujana, she disappeared from the city, faded into shadows, lived quietly, carrying the weight of her choice like an invisible scar. No one knew her story. No one knew her pain, except one person, Jessy, the woman who would one day protect her secret at the cost of her own reputation. The city mocked her. Everywhere Jessy went, she heard the whispers. That's the girl who refused Adrian. She must have lost her mind. Imagine rejecting the richest man alive. How ungrateful. Women pitied her, men avoided her, even her relatives sighed in disappointment. Some openly scolded her. "You've ruined your life, Jessy," her aunt said one afternoon, arms crossed, voice dripping with judgment. "Girls like you spend their whole lives dreaming of such proposals. Do you think love will fill your stomach? Do you think love will buy you a home?" Jessy said nothing. She just smiled faintly, the way one smiles when arguing is pointless, because she knew something no one else did. Her refusal wasn't madness. It wasn't pride. It wasn't rebellion. It was loyalty. Loyalty to someone the world had forgotten. Her sister, Sujana. Yes, Sujana wasn't just some girl from Adrian's past. She wasn't just the woman who had once held his heart. She was Jessy's older sister. And Jessy, more than anyone else, knew the truth of her sacrifice. From childhood, Jessy had adored Sujana. Where Jessy was fiery and outspoken, Sujana was gentle and calm. She was the type of sister who would take blame for Jessy's mischief, who would patch her clothes when they tore, who would save half her meal to feed Jessy when she pretended she wasn't hungry. Their bond was unshakable. Two sisters against the world. So when Sujana returned home one night years ago, eyes red from crying, whispering only, "It's over between us," Jessy knew something deeper had happened. She pressed, begged, demanded answers, but Sujana wouldn't speak. All she said was, "Promise me you'll never tell Adrian. Promise me you'll let me go," Jessy promised. But her heart broke watching her sister fade into shadows, carrying a grief she never explained. Over time, Jessy pieced together fragments. She heard of the threats, the insults from Adrian's powerful family. She noticed the quiet way Sujana avoided the city, avoided news of Adrian, avoided anything that could tear open the wound again. And when Adrian, years later, proposed to her, Jessy understood instantly. He didn't love her. He couldn't. His heart already belonged to her sister. The night Adrian asked for Jessy's hand, she had stood frozen, staring at the man who could offer her the world. But as she looked into his eyes, she saw it. That same emptiness. That same unspoken longing. It wasn't for her. It had never been for her. It was for Sujana. So Jessy refused. Not out of arrogance, not out of some strange desire to defy society. She refused because she would not betray her sister. She would not become the substitute for the woman Adrian truly loved. But of course, no one else knew this. Her parents scolded her endlessly. "Jessy, you threw away your future. You'll regret this when you're old and alone. What is wrong with you? He's the most powerful man alive." Her friends avoided her, afraid to be seen with the girl who had humiliated Adrian. Suitors withdrew their proposals, unwilling to marry a woman who dared reject such a man. But Jessy held her ground. At night, when her heart ached from the loneliness, she would sit with Sujana's old letters, the ones she had written but never sent. Letters filled with love, with pain, with longing for Adrian, and Jessy would whisper into the quiet, "They call me crazy, but if protecting you is madness, then I will stay mad forever." What Jessy didn't know, however, was that fate had already begun weaving the threads tighter, because Sujana, after years of hiding, was about to return. And when she did, Jessy's sacrifice would no longer remain in the shadows. Her choice to refuse Adrian would set into motion a storm none of them could stop. For now, Jessy walked through the streets with her head held high, even as neighbors muttered and mocked. She was a woman with a secret shield in her heart, one the world couldn't break. But soon, that shield would be tested, because Adrian's gaze, still burning with the memory of Sujana, was searching again. And Sujana herself was closer than Jessy realized. The world has a cruel way of punishing women who dare to defy it. Jessy learned that lesson quickly. It wasn't just whispers anymore, it was full-blown ridicule. Neighbors would stop mid-conversation when she passed, their eyes heavy with judgment. Shopkeepers treated her with thinly veiled disdain, as if refusing Adrian made her less worthy of kindness. Invitations to weddings and gatherings, once plentiful, stopped arriving. She brought shame on herself, they said. Imagine being offered the throne and spitting on it. She'll regret it until her dying breath. Even children whispered in the streets, repeating words they heard from adults. Jessy walked with her head high, but inside each word was like a pebble thrown at her soul. Her parents barely spoke to her anymore. Her mother wept quietly at night, blaming Jessy for ruining the family's chance to rise above their modest life. Her father avoided looking at her, as if her face reminded him of lost wealth. And still, Jessy remained silent, because silence was the only way to protect Sujana. Meanwhile, Adrian continued to rule the city like nothing had changed. The newspapers still praised him. The business world still admired him. The women still dreamt of him. If anything, Jessy's refusal made him even more intriguing. Imagine a man so powerful that even rejection cannot touch him. He's even more desirable now, untamed, unbroken. At parties, Adrian still appeared with his perfect smile, his tailored suits, his confident stride. But Jessy noticed something others didn't. Whenever her name came up in conversations, his jaw tightened ever so slightly. His gaze hardened. And yet, in rare moments, when he thought no one was looking, his eyes grew distant. He wasn't angry. He wasn't humiliated. He was haunted by a name no one else dared to speak. Sujana. Jessy often found herself wondering if Adrian hated her. Did he despise her for refusing him? Or did he understand? She couldn't ask. She wouldn't. For too open. That wound meant exposing Sujana's truth, and Jessy had sworn she would never betray her sister, so she bore the judgment of the world alone. Then came the rumors. One evening, as Jessy sat quietly in her favorite cafe, she overheard two women whispering behind her. They say Adrian's still single. Maybe he's waiting for Jessy to change her mind. No, I heard he's still in love with someone else. Jessy froze. The woman leaned closer, lowering her voice. Her name was Sujana, I think. But no one knows what happened to her. Some say she left him. Others say his family forced her away. Jessy's heart clenched. She stared down at her cup, fighting to keep her hands from trembling, so the whispers had begun. Sujana's name, long buried, was surfacing again. Jessy left the cafe quickly, her thoughts in turmoil. If the city dug too deep, if the truth came out, her sister would be dragged into the very storm she had tried to escape. And Jessy couldn't let that happen. That night, Adrian stood at his penthouse window, staring at the endless city lights. He thought of Jessy's refusal, of her calm voice saying, "I cannot marry you." And though the world mocked her, though society painted her as foolish, Adrian knew the truth. Jessy had seen through him. She had seen the shadow of Sujana in his heart, and in some twisted way, he respected her for it, because unlike everyone else who only cared for his wealth, Jessy had dared to say no to the richest man alive. But what she didn't know, what no one knew, was that Adrian had never stopped searching for Sujana. Not with money, not with power, but with patience, with quiet, endless longing. And soon, his patience would be rewarded, because Sujana was coming back. I still remember the silence of that evening, the kind of silence that doesn't calm you, but squeezes your chest, demanding you pay attention. Jessy sat by her bedroom window, the soft yellow light of her lamp casting shadows over her tear-stained face. She thought about Sujana, her best friend, her confidant, her sister in everything except blood. She thought about the promise they had made to always support each other, no matter what. But now, Jessy was being called a traitor. The whole town whispered behind her back. They called her a fool for refusing the richest man's hand. Some called her arrogant. Some said she was crazy. And a few, the cruelest of them all, said she had thrown away the chance to change her miserable fate. Jessy's chest burned with anger. They don't understand. They never knew the truth, she whispered to herself, because the truth was far darker than the fairy tale they imagined. The richest man in town, Mr. Arjun Malik, wasn't offering Jessy love. He was offering her ownership. His proposal wasn't a question of partnership. It was a command disguised as generosity. He wanted to control her, silence her voice, and bind her to a life where her every step was watched. Jessy knew this because she had seen what he had done to others, and worse. She knew his secret. Arjun's obsession wasn't with her. It was with Sujana. Jessy could never forget that night. The night she saw him, standing outside Sujana's house in the rain, staring at her window like a starving wolf waiting for prey. She had followed him quietly, confused at first, only to discover the truth that broke her heart. He had been in love with Sujana for years. A toxic, consuming, dangerous kind of love. But Sujana didn't know. She thought Arjun's interest was in Jessy. She thought her best friend had simply turned down a fairy tale marriage for pride. And because Sujana didn't know, she blamed Jessy. And that, more than the rumors, more than the town's cruelty, was what cut Jessy the deepest. Her best friend thought she was selfish. That night, Jessy's father knocked gently at her door. His face was worn from years of hardship, but his eyes were soft, carrying both sorrow and pride. "Jessy," he said quietly, "I may not have much, but I raised you to follow your heart. If saying no to that man is your truth, then stand by it, even if the world calls you mad." Jessy nodded, her throat tightening. She wanted to tell her father everything, the danger Sujana was in, the obsession Arjun carried like a shadow. But the words wouldn't come. The truth was too heavy. And Sujana would never believe her without proof. The next morning, things took a darker turn. Jessy arrived at the local cafe where Sujana worked part-time, only to see a scene that chilled her blood. Sujana stood at the counter, her smile polite but nervous, while Arjun himself leaned over, too close, his hand brushing hers as he ordered. Jessy's fists clenched at her sides. Arjun caught her watching and smirked. A slow, mocking smirk. That said, "I know you see me, but what will you do about it?" the other customers whispered. Some giggled at the idea of the richest man lowering himself to flirt in a cafe. Others whispered about Jessy again. She refused him, and look, now he's after her friend. How pitiful. Jessy could barely breathe. She wanted to grab Sujana and drag her away, but she forced herself to stay still. Arjun wanted her to lash out. He wanted her to look jealous. Instead, Jessy walked past, her face calm, her heart screaming inside her chest. But later that night, when Sujana showed up at Jessy's doorstep, her voice trembling as she asked, "Jessy, do you hate me? Because he keeps showing up where I am." Jessy knew things had gone too far. She grabbed Sujana's hands tightly and said with a shaky voice, "No, Sujana, I don't hate you. I never could. But you need to listen to me carefully. Arjun isn't the man everyone thinks he is. He doesn't love me. He doesn't want me. He wants you." Sujana froze, her face pale. That can't be true." Jessy's eyes filled with tears. "I wish it wasn't, but I've seen it with my own eyes, and that's why I refused him, because I would never, ever betray you like that." Silence fell between them, heavy, crushing. Sujana's lips parted as if she wanted to argue, but deep down she remembered the strange way Arjun's eyes lingered on her, the way his compliments always felt personal. And suddenly, for the first time, she didn't know what to say. Jessy knew this was only the beginning of a much darker game. Because Arjun Malik wasn't the type to accept rejection. And now that she had exposed his secret, both she and Sujana were in danger. When word about Jessy's rejection of Arman spread through the town, whispers started to crawl into every corner like an unstoppable vine. People looked at her with pity, some with disbelief, and many with anger. "How foolish," they muttered. "She threw away the chance of a lifetime. Who refuses the richest man in the city?" But Jessy's heart was her compass, and it was unwavering. Each day she passed through the marketplace, she could feel the eyes on her. Shopkeepers would pause mid-sentence, neighbors would hush their gossip until she walked by, and then their voices would rise again like daggers in her back. Her mother noticed the pressure building. "Jessy," she said one evening, her voice heavy with both love and concern, "you could have had a secure life. No worries, no struggles. Why would you do this to yourself? Why would you put yourself against the entire world?" Jessy's lips trembled, but her eyes remained steady. "Because, Mama, he doesn't love me. His heart belongs to someone else. How could I live a life knowing I was only a shadow in his world? I'd rather be poor and true to myself than rich and hollow." The words silenced her mother, but not the rest of the world. Arman, however, didn't retreat. He was not used to rejection, and the bruise to his ego cut deeper than a blade. He sent flowers, he sent gifts, and he even stood outside her little garden one evening, asking softly, "Why won't you let me in, Jessy? Everyone thinks we're meant to be. Why do you fight it?" Jessy's chest tightened. Her refusal wasn't because of pride, it was because of truth. She looked at him, her voice trembling but filled with conviction. "Because you love Sujana. You can deceive the world, but not me. I see it in your eyes. Every time you say my name, her shadow lingers behind it." For the first time, Arman faltered. He didn't argue. He didn't deny it. He simply stood there, silent, his jaw tense, his fists clenching by his sides. And then, without another word, he left. That night, Jessy's heart pounded as if she had just fought a war. Alone in her little room, she whispered to herself, "Did I do the right thing? Did I ruin my life forever?" But deep down, she knew the answer. Meanwhile, Sujana was unaware of the storm brewing around her name. She lived a quiet life, far away from the drama, never realizing that she was the hidden reason Jessy refused the wealth, the power, and the security every girl in town would die for. But fate has a way of pulling threads together. One fateful morning, Jessy received an anonymous letter tucked under her door. The handwriting was shaky, hurried. It read, "You think you know Arman's heart, but the truth is much darker. Meet me at the old riverside tonight if you want to uncover what hides behind his wealth." Jessy's breath hitched. Her first instinct was fear. Was this a trap? A cruel joke? Or was it the beginning of a truth that would shatter everything she thought she knew? Her hands trembled as she clutched the paper, staring at it in disbelief. For the first time, doubt crept into her chest like a shadow. Could it be that there was more to Arman's love, more to his obsession with Sujana than anyone had dared to imagine? And with that haunting thought, the night ahead promised answers Jessy wasn't sure she was ready to hear. I had thought the worst storm had passed. That after Jessy's daring refusal of Arman's proposal and Sujana's gradual healing, life would settle into a gentler rhythm. But destiny is a strange artist. It paints with shadows even when the canvas seems full of light. It all began on an ordinary afternoon at the flower shop. Sujana was arranging a bouquet for a little girl's birthday party. The shop smelled of roses, lavender, and sweet peas. Jessy was helping stack a shipment of vases in the back. For the first time in months, Sujana's laugh rang out like music, soft, hesitant, but real. I remember thinking, finally, maybe she is learning to breathe again. But then, the door chimed, and in walked a figure who froze both their smiles. It was Arman. Not dressed in his usual polished suit, not with his usual arrogance, but in casual clothes, his hair unkempt, eyes hollow like someone who hadn't slept in days. He held no flowers, no gifts, just a tired, haunted face. Sujana's hands trembled. A vase slipped, shattering onto the floor. Jessy rushed forward protectively, his stance firm, like a shield between her and the man who once broke her world. Why? Are you here? Jessy's voice was low but sharp as glass. Armand didn't raise his voice. He didn't swagger. He simply said almost brokenly, I needed to see her, just once more. Sujana stiffened, her breath caught in her throat. Jessy shook his head. You've done enough. Leave. But Armand's gaze didn't shift. It stayed locked on Sujana, filled with something no one had expected. Regret. I was blind, he whispered. Blinded by pride, by everything but the one thing that mattered. Sujana, I loved you. I just never said it the right way. I lost you before I even understood what I had. And now you're with him. And you're happy. I don't deserve to ruin that. Silence swallowed the room. The only sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall and Sujana's uneven breathing. For months she had buried her feelings, tried to erase him like an old scar. Yet hearing his voice like this, raw and stripped of arrogance, shook her. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Jessy reached for her hand. You don't need to answer him. Not anymore. But Sujana's heart wavered. Not in love. No, she knew her heart belonged to Jessy now. But in closure. In all the unanswered questions that had haunted her sleepless nights. Finally, she whispered, voice trembling. Why did you humiliate me that day, Armin? Why did you stand there and let the world mock me? If you loved me, why did you act like I was nothing? Armin closed his eyes, shoulders heavy. Because I was a coward. I thought keeping my pride meant strength. I thought admitting I loved you would make me vulnerable. And when I saw you hurt, instead of protecting you, I hid behind my name, my wealth, and I lost the only thing I ever truly cared about. Tears blurred Sujana's vision. Not for love, but for the years wasted, for the girl she had once been, desperate for affection from a man who didn't know how to love. Jessy's grip tightened. He looked at Armin with fire. Don't come back. Don't open wounds she's finally closing. She doesn't need your apologies. She needs peace. But Armin only gave a faint, broken smile. I know. I won't return. I just needed her to know. For once, without lies. Goodbye, Sujana. And with that, he left. Quietly. Without drama, without arrogance. The bell on the door chimed once. Then silence. Sujana collapsed onto Jessy's chest, sobbing. Not for Armin, but for herself. For the years she had wasted believing she wasn't enough. Jessy stroked her hair gently. You were always enough. You just needed the right eyes. To see it. In that moment, Sujana realized something vital. Her story with Armin wasn't about lost love. It was about rebirth. He had been her cage. Jessy was her freedom. But little did they know, Armin's farewell wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something darker, something that would shake their fragile happiness once more. Because, while Armin had walked away quietly, someone else had seen him enter the shop, someone with sharp eyes and a greedy heart, and rumors. Oh, rumors were about to spread like wildfire. I woke up that morning with an unusual heaviness in my chest. Something told me the day ahead would not be ordinary. Maybe it was the silence in the air, or the way the light filtered through my window. Muted, hesitant, as if it, too, knew that truth was on the verge of breaking free. By the time I reached the office, whispers were already circulating. Papers shuffled nervously, assistants exchanged side glances, and the air felt charged with secrets. I didn't know then that Sujana had already made her move. Sujana was always underestimated by those who didn't know her. People thought she was fragile, quiet, too soft for the brutal storms of the business world. But she wasn't. She was water, gentle, flowing, but strong enough to carve through stone. That day, she had taken her quiet strength and turned it into fire. By noon, news outlets exploded with the story, "The richest man's fiancée caught." In a web of lies and deceit, photos surfaced, videos leaked, documents signed behind closed doors were now plastered across the internet for millions to see. And there she was, Melina. The woman everyone adored, the perfect heiress, the dazzling beauty, caught red-handed in a scandal so dark it stained not only her, but everyone tied to her. I sat frozen, staring at the headlines as my hands trembled. It wasn't just about Melina's betrayal. It was about Arjun. His name dragged through mud, his reputation questioned, his heart shattered. When I finally saw him later that evening, he wasn't the unshakable figure everyone knew him to be. He looked like a man stripped of everything, standing in the ruins of his carefully built empire. His eyes met mine, tired, broken, searching, and that's when the world tilted. Because in that gaze, I didn't see the richest man everyone envied. I saw a man whose heart had been caged, betrayed, and bruised beyond recognition. I saw someone who, despite all the wealth in his hands, was poorer than anyone could imagine. And I knew, deep inside, that Sujana had not done this for power or revenge. She had done it to protect, to free him, to give him a chance to start again, even if the world was watching. But here's the twist that no one, least of all me, saw coming. Melina wasn't done. Not yet. If she was going to fall, she intended to drag everyone else into the pit with her. That night, as the city buzzed with scandal, a single message landed on my phone. It was from an unknown number, but the words were sharp enough to cut through me. "Jessy, you think you know the truth? But you don't. Meet me or watch him burn with me." I remember clutching the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. The world outside blurred, the sound of traffic faded, and all I could hear was the echo of that threat. For the first time, I realized that this wasn't just a love story anymore. It was a war, and I was standing at the very heart of it. The Kiwior night was thick with tension, the kind that makes every heartbeat feel loud, echoing against the walls of an empty street. I could feel it. The city itself holding its breath, waiting for what was about to happen. Jessy and Sujana had never faced anything like this before. This wasn't gossip, wasn't whispers behind closed doors. This was a storm that had arrived, full force, and it had Arjun, Melina, and everyone they knew in its eye. The rendezvous point was a quiet cafe near the river, the kind of place where no one would expect a showdown. Sujana's hand trembled in Jessy's as they entered. The door chime sounded like a gunshot in the silence. And there he was, Arjun. His usually flawless composure cracked, eyes burning with a mix of rage, hurt, and something undefinable, pain that ran deeper than any public scandal could touch, and across from him, Melina stood, radiating fury and arrogance. She had always been the type who believed wealth and charm could manipulate hearts. But that night, she looked desperate. She knew she had lost control, and she wasn't ready to let go. "I warned you," Melina said, voice cold, cutting through the quiet like a knife. "You think you can just take him away from me? From me, the woman who built everything around him?" Sujana stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear she felt inside. "You don't control him. You never did. And no one controls love. Especially not someone who belongs to someone else." Jessy, standing beside her, finally broke her silence. "You tried to destroy him, to destroy us, to destroy everything that mattered. But your games end here. You have no power over what he truly feels." For a moment, silence fell. The tension between the four of them was so thick it could have been sliced with a knife. Then slowly Arjun spoke, his voice low and steady, but with raw emotion seeping through every word. "Melina, I never loved you. I never wanted you. I wanted Sujana. And everything else? All the games, all the power, all the money. It means nothing without her." Melina's face paled, her carefully maintained arrogance cracking. You're lying," she spat. "You need me. You cannot live without me." Arjun shook his head, the intensity in his eyes undeniable. I survived years without you. I survived when I thought I lost her forever. And now that she's here, standing in front of me, I will never let her go." Sujana's breath caught. She hadn't expected him to be so vulnerable, so human. The man who had once seemed untouchable, untamable, now looked like someone who had been fighting every day just to survive the love he couldn't claim. Jessy squeezed her sister's hand. "See? This is what you deserve. Truth, even if it's painful." Melina, realizing her hold was gone, made one last desperate move. She lunged forward, trying to grab Arjun, trying to drag him back into her world of lies. But Arjun was faster. He stepped aside, calm but firm, his eyes never leaving Sujana, and In that instant, the spell broke. Melina stumbled, the weight of her schemes crashing down around her. Security from the cafe quickly intervened, and she was escorted out, screaming threats and empty promises. The door shut behind her. Silence fell again, but this time it was different. It was heavy with relief, with unspoken words, with the knowledge that the storm had passed. For now, Arjun finally turned to Sujana. "I know I lost you once because of my mistakes, my pride, my family, but I can't lose you again. Not now, not ever." Sujana looked at him, tears welling up in her eyes. I believed you were gone. I thought you didn't care anymore. But seeing you here, standing for me, I believe you now." Jessy smiled softly, the burden she had carried alone finally easing. Her refusal, her sacrifice had not been in vain. She had protected her sister's happiness, and now, after years of hidden pain, justice and love had finally found their balance. Arjun reached out, taking Sujana's hands in his. "No more hiding, no more secrets, only us, from now on." And in that quiet cafe by the river, surrounded by the remnants of lies and schemes, they all realized something simple but profound. Love that survives the hardest trials isn't fragile. It's unbreakable. The days after the confrontation were quiet, almost eerily so. The city had seen the scandal erupt, but slowly the chaos began to fade. Headlines shifted, gossip turned to whispers, and people moved on to the next spectacle, leaving Jessy, Sujana, and Arjun to navigate the aftermath in peace. For Jessy, it was the first time in months that she felt the weight on her shoulders begin to lift. The world had judged her, mocked her, and misunderstood her motives, but now her actions had finally proven themselves. She had protected Sujana, honored their bond, and faced down the richest man in the city without flinching. And now, for the first time she could breathe. Sujana, too, felt a freedom she hadn't known for years. She had carried guilt, confusion, and fear, believing that the world's cruelty and Arjun's mistakes were hers to bear. But standing in the quiet aftermath, she realized she had survived. She had her sister by her side, and Arjun's love was now honest, unshakable, and devoted. Arjun, however, carried his own silent burdens. He had faced his mistakes, exposed his pride, and finally admitted the truth to the world and to the woman he had loved all along. The experience had humbled him, reshaped him, and forced him to understand what real love meant. Not power, not wealth, not control. Only truth, loyalty, and unwavering devotion. One evening, the three of them sat together on the terrace of Jessy's small apartment. The city lights shimmered like 1,000 tiny stars, reflecting on the river below. It was quiet, peaceful. For the first time in years, none of them felt the sting of judgment or the shadow of unspoken secrets. Sujana leaned against Jessy, resting her head on her sister's shoulder. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "For everything. For refusing him. For protecting me. For standing by me even when the world was cruel." Jessy smiled, brushing her hair back. "You don't have to thank me. That's what sisters do. We protect each other. And I would do it again. 1,000 times over." Arjun watched them quietly, understanding at last that the bond between the sisters was something stronger than anything he had ever known. I see now, he said softly, that love isn't just about desire. It's about trust, sacrifice, and standing up for what's right, even when it hurts. Jessy, you've taught me that. Sujana lifted her eyes to him, the first light of hope and forgiveness shining through her tears. And you've shown me that love can heal even the deepest scars, she said. Arjun nodded. No more secrets, no more games. Only us, only truth, only each other. The city continued its relentless rhythm below them, but for Jessy, Sujana, and Arjun, time had paused. The storm had passed, the lies were gone, and a new chapter had begun, one written in honesty, courage, and an unbreakable bond. And in that moment, Jessy finally understood the power of her choice. She had been called crazy, foolish, and reckless for refusing the richest man in the city. But now she knew the truth. Refusing him had not been madness. It had been love. Love for her, sister, love for what was right. Love that had changed everything. As the night deepened and the stars shone brighter over the river, the three of them sat together, hearts aligned, finally free. And for the first time, Jessy felt what she had always dreamed of. Not wealth, not admiration, not validation, but peace. Peace, love, and the knowledge that sometimes being called crazy is simply a sign that you dared to choose the right path when no one else would. The city slowly returned to its rhythm, unaware that a quiet revolution had occurred, not in politics, not in wealth, but in hearts. Jessy's refusal of Arjun had once been seen as madness, a scandal, an unforgivable act of defiance. But now, as whispers of admiration replaced whispers of scorn, the world began to understand. Jessy walked through the marketplace with a calm she had never known. Shopkeepers greeted her with smiles instead of suspicion. Neighbors nodded with newfound respect, and even strangers glanced at her, sensing a quiet strength that demanded acknowledgement. She wasn't rich, she wasn't famous, but she was unshakable, unbreakable, and fully herself. Sujana stood beside her, radiant with a freedom earned from years of silent struggle. The world had not been kind to her either, but together the sisters had survived storms no one could imagine. Their bond, once tested, had only grown stronger, unshakable in the face of greed, lies, and cruelty. Arjun had returned to his life, but differently now. Gone was the arrogance, the pride that had once blinded him. In its place was humility and devotion, a man finally capable of loving fully and honestly. He had no desire to dominate, no need to impress. His heart belonged to Sujana, and he had learned that nothing else mattered. One bright morning, the three of them gathered at the little riverside cafe, the place where truth had finally been spoken. They watched the sunlight glint off the water, the city humming softly behind them. Jessy turned to Sujana. You're free now. Free from his obsession, free from the world's judgments, and free to live your life as you choose. Sujana smiled, tears glinting in her eyes. Thanks to you. I don't know how I could have faced any of this without you. Arjun reached for Sujana's hand, his eyes soft and sincere. And I will never take this for granted again. I promise you that. The sisters exchanged a glance, one filled with love, relief, and a shared understanding. Some bonds are stronger than wealth, stronger than fame, stronger than any challenge life can throw at you. Months later, the city still whispered about the girl who had refused the richest man alive. But now it was with respect, even awe. Jessy's choice had not only protected Sujana's happiness, but had also inspired those who heard her story. Courage, love, and loyalty mattered more than riches or status. And as the sun set over the city, casting a golden glow over the river, the three of them walked together, united, unafraid, and ready to face a future of their own making. Jessy had once been called crazy for choosing love and truth over wealth and power, but in the end, it was clear she had made the right choice. Because in a world that often confuses madness with bravery, the bravest thing of all is to follow your heart, no matter the cost. And so, their story ended not with scandal, not with heartbreak, but with hope. Hope that love, loyalty, and courage could survive anything. The stars reflected on the water, and for the first time, Jessy smiled. Not for the world, not for wealth, but for the unshakable bond she shared with her sister, the happiness of the woman she loved, and the knowledge that sometimes being called crazy simply means you dared to do what everyone else feared. Thanks for watching. Hoped you liked it. If you watched till the end, please comment love so that we could understand you were with us till the end. As well as please let us know, where are you watching from? Before leaving, please hit the subscribe button, comment your thought, and share with your nearest and dearest one. See you in the next one. Until to the next one, spread love.